Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again that time of week. What time of week is it? Well, it's the time of the week where we come onto your broadcast radio waves and we dig underneath the dirt. We expose what's really going on. We tell you we drop those truth bombs that the mainstream media does not want you to hear. We call out the establishment's BS, both nationally and locally. It is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may be. So I want to apologize real quick. I was gone last week, and I meant to say something about it, but I forgot. I went down to the beautiful mountains of New Mexico, and for the most part, I wasn't as much as a political nerd as I usually am. You know, reading various anti-establishment underground media sources just about on the daily. But from what I heard, I guess like everything decided to happen while I was out of town.
It did. It really did.
All of the stupid.
All of the stupid.
All of it, everywhere, all at the same time.
Yeah. And that's both at the national and local level. Like I'm involved in a couple of like local organizing chats and stuff, and like all of a sudden my phone's going off about like, oh, we're keeping some ICE is trying to take one of our people, so they're getting put up in the local church, and apparently there's this group called Justice for Otsego that is exposing there's some high cancer rates in the area, which likely have a lot to do with environmental pollution by a certain corporation. Again, I don't know too much about that, but they have a group on Facebook. They've been putting stuff out. Hoping maybe next week we can have like somebody on to talk about it more in depth. But and then of course everything going on at the national level. Goodness, Cambridge Analytica, the Cambridge Analytica scandal finally broke into the mainstream media, and we might talk a little bit more what I mean by that in a little bit. Also, of course, you know, the mad racist bomber down in Austin, that has come to some sort of a conclusion.
Yeah, he blew himself up.
He did.
I mean,
yeah, he blew himself up.
I mean, you have the mad racist bomber. You have a neo-Nazi winning in a primary in Illinois.
Yeah.
You have a bunch of
stuff to be like around.
Oh my God!
Like, he was around for the first round of Nazis, so doesn't that make him like an actual?
He's old enough to be an actual Nazi. On top of that, you have, you know, a bunch of.
He's from the greatest generation of Nazis.
Yeah, he's from the greatest generation of Nazis. Yes, he is. He really is.
Back in my day, we didn't have these frogs.
I mean, we didn't have the frogs. They really had.
I don't understand this sad frog guy.
And then
we just had the Iron Eagle.
And then you have a bunch of establishment Democrats and the voting system of Illinois screwing over actual progressives.
That was
and
sad,
the actual BS of votes being recounted or not counted for certain people, so certain establishment Democrats can win. Which, watching in real time on multiple websites, was insane.
Okay, so I gotta say, I was on a Greyhound bus for the elections yesterday, so I do definitely want to dive into that. I was just walking. I assume maybe there were some shenanigans, but for those who don't know, Illinois primary was today. It was not a good day. It was not a good day for the progressive left. It left me quite pissed off, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, you had mostly a lot of the Justice Democrats and some of the really strong progressive candidates basically being drowned out by money. Basically being drowned out by money and being drowned out by name recognition. So much so that one of the establishment Democrats that ran, his slogan was, "The name you know."
Isn't that the same guy going to be running against the
neo-Nazi,
the Nazi?
Yeah, it's the same.
So we truly get to see the conservatives of this country. We will truly get to see whether or not that as long as there's an R next to the name, they'll vote for a Nazi over a socially conservative Democrat.
Yeah, and let's be clear too. I was doing a little bit of research on that guy, and like he's like an anti-abortion Democrat who is like he's for like a lot of things that Republicans are on board with, like cutting certain social programs and stuff. So he's to the right of even like what establishment Democrats are pitching right now. So
it's not just that he didn't vote for the Affordable Care Act. He did not endorse President Obama.
That blew my mind.
He's anti-choice.
Yeah.
Like
he's a Republican.
He's to the right of Obama.
He's to the right of a moderate Republican.
Yeah.
And President Obama was, in his own words, that his policies are moderate Republican.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it blows my mind. And the thing that one of the other things that blew my mind is how close some of the races were. Like a couple thousand votes. Like it for one thing is, it's funny to watch a establishment Democrat put $70 million into a race so they don't lose their seat when they don't have anything to say.
Mm-hmm. No, that's right.
Yeah, and it's crazy to me to see how easy it is that if you have enough time and enough time to get your name out there, get your policies out there, that you could win. Because a lot of these votes, some of the districts were heavy with the name recognition and with the money, but with enough time and enough pressure, man, people power can overpower it. That's the thing that I got from it.
Yeah. But
at the same time, we're gonna have to keep it real. It was bad.
And
it was bad.
I'll put, like, there's two ways I can throw it out, just talking about how close some of these races were. And I think there's an optimistic and there's a cynical way to look at it. And I'd say, like, the cynical way to look at it would be this. And granted, like, I maybe if you could go a little further in depth, Lawrence, with some of the shenanigans you're talking about, but in a lot of these progressive races, we see borderline voter suppression, if not outright voter suppression, happen a lot of the time. We saw this a lot in the primary last year with Bernie Sanders. We saw this in a lot of the other, like, primaries that have been going on this year. And the cynical take from it could be, is this just how it's always going to be? Progressives are going to come in so close, and it's just going to be like the rabbit. The paper rabbit the dog is chasing around the track to keep progressives orbiting the Democratic Party. But I do want to bring it back to as dysfunctional as a lot of our voting system is, and as much like voter suppression and election fraud does take place, any time where you have a substantial enough majority, you can basically overclock those mechanisms that are put there to try to cheat the vote. And what I mean by that is this. Look at President Obama. There were actually a lot of the same tactics that the Republicans used successfully in 2016 to cheat their way to the presidency did not work against Obama in 2008 and 2012 because he had such kind of an overflow of vote total that despite the fact that election fraud or voter suppression occurred, he was still able to win. That's what progressives need to do. They need to get such a large percentage of the total that they effectively overclock the efforts of Republicans and establishment Democrats to basically cheat the vote.
I absolutely agree with that. There was a couple of different votes. There was a couple of different races. There was a race in the 13th where the progressive was winning. The progressive was winning, and then out of nowhere, some of the votes just didn't count. Like by 2 points, by 2-3 points, and then for some reason, these selection of votes just didn't count. And I'm sitting there watching it in real time, and I'm like, where I was watching it, TYT does a thing where on election night they'll stay up and track the votes in real time.
Really good coverage, by the way.
They have amazing coverage. Also, they had like Jimmy Dore and a couple other people that that they keep it real. They keep it real. They give you analysis, and their analysis are really in depth and good. And some of the votes, some of the people just got straight blown out because of the money that was poured into it. Some tactics of people, of their opponents, taking their yard signs, going to intimidate them. Yeah. Some having people in the DCCC put smears against them. One of the progressive candidates, one of the smears against them was they were a part of the grassroots organization, Brand New Congress, or something like. It was one of the
Our Revolution. I think.
No. It wasn't Our Revolution. It was a different one. It was I think it was Represent Us or something like that.
Oh, Represent Us. Yeah.
And because Represent Us has Republicans in it, the smear against them. I know who you're talking about. Yeah, the smear against them was. They're part of the Tea Party.
Yeah, I think my friend Elizabeth Lindquist was one of the victims of this.
Yeah. So,
are you serious?
I'm being dead serious. Like the smear that it wasn't just the DCCC, it was the establishment Democrat, and their smear against them was they're part of Represent Us. And the Republican Tea Party is also part of Represent Us. Therefore, they're Republicans.
How dare they reach out to these evil Republicans whose votes we're trying to get?
I mean, okay, no, that is your strategy. Yeah. This just goes to show that Democrats are 100% as guilty of everything the left says about the right. And it's just one of those things where when you boil down to it, the campaigns that will ultimately win on the outset, when it really matters, are going to be the ones that have proved themselves to be to have integrity throughout their political career, blah, blah, blah. What I'm saying is Bernie Sanders 2020.
No, hold on a second.
Just one quick point. It reminds me of something, too, like the Democratic Party does that's really two-faced. And it's like, on one hand, they will talk about the importance of getting the moderate Republican to vote Democrat. So you have Chuck Schumer saying, for every leftist we lose, we'll get 5 moderate Republicans from the suburbs. But at the same time, when you have a candidate who can draw in anti-establishment Republicans, such as Daniel Biss or Elizabeth Lindquist, etc., their tactic turns to, look at this person, they're attractive to those evil Republicans, so don't vote for them. So it's like, on the one hand, they want the Republicans that have no sincere stance against economic inequality or government corruption, but the ones that call those things out, they're evil. They're like those bad Trump people. Don't talk to them.
The other thing that makes me upset. It doesn't make me upset. It only makes me want to fight more, and it only makes me want to tell people more about our primary that's coming up in April.
Not until August. Actually.
No, August.
But there's the Democratic conventions.
The Democratic conventions in April. I unfortunately will not be able to make it, but I know multiple people who will, and I'm trying to get as many people who are registered Democrats to go and support those who are actually going to represent us. And a lot of these people, and a lot of you who were running that were Justice Democrats and others, this was their first time running. When Cory Booker first ran, and he ran for mayor, he got blown out by the establishment Democrat that was there, who he was, that was so legendary, I forget his name, and he wasn't supposed to even come close. The next time Cory Booker ran, he beat him. Not only did he beat him and become mayor, he then became a senator.
And let's make sure too, kind of the vanguard of the current reemergence of leftist politics in the current landscape, Mr. Bernie Sanders. He lost a lot when he first started.
Oh yeah.
His early campaigns, he climbed 3%, 4%, 5%, go back to 3%. But he just kept running and running and running until one day he became mayor of Burlington by 1 point. It was, or less than a point.
It was less than a point. It was a couple votes.
Yeah. So a lot. Keep in mind, it's a long haul, and I'd say leftists actually they do have it a little bit easier than Bernie did back in his day because I feel like, it's
because of the internet, because of the internet, because of the age of the internet, you don't have to use consultants and spend majority of your money in. That was the other thing that they were using, which I'm gonna bring up in a minute. You don't have to spend money on consultants when you can go directly to the people. But mail-in ballot, mailers, and yard signs and all that still costs money. And another trick that the establishment has been doing to far leftist candidates, is not giving them voter rolls or taking them to court. So they have to spend money on legal fees instead of actually spending money on the campaign, because a lot of these Democrats that's a part of our revolution and Justice Democrats are not using the DNC's consultants.
That's right.
And, but also speaking of Bernie had a town hall on Monday. Like, it was Bernie, Elizabeth Warren.
Wait a second, is that why you canceled D&D?
That's not why I canceled D&D.
Okay.
But I'm not gonna lie and say I wasn't watching it. That's not why I didn't cancel D&D. But I don't blame you. Here's the thing. It was Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Michael Moore, and Mr. Darren Helton. It was hosted by the Young Turks. It was also being streamed on Now This. It was such...
The Guardian, etc.
Yeah, The Guardian also streamed it. It became such a buzz that even CNN had to put on their little bottom bar, like where
they put the real news.
Yeah, where they put the real news. Where they put the actual news. They was like
actual news, guys.
Yeah, and they said they had to put it up like, Bernie Sanders is holding the town hall right now. Y'all can click to this link.
Beating our butt in the ratings.
Yeah, like man, the knowledge that they dropped in that town hall absolutely blew me away. And the last town hall that he had on Medicare for All was amazing. But just to give you some of the highlights that I took away from it, 60% of Americans do not have $400 in their bank account. So if a loved one was to pass away in their family, they would not have the money to go to the funeral. 60% of Americans do not have that luxury. That's a luxury now to go say goodbye goodbye to someone who you might have loved or a family member. That the top 10% of our country, when it comes to wealth, when we talk about wealth and how it affects our country, the top 10% has over 75% of the wealth in our country. It makes sense because the top 3 richest people in America own more than half the country, or half the.
They own more. They own the same amount of wealth as the bottom 50% of America. They are as wealthy as the poorest half of America.
Now, just to add to that, and this is another statistic that blew me away. The top 10% gets when it comes to wealth. And the recurring wealth that they get from our taxes and our economy, they get 75%. They have 75% of the wealth of our country. The bottom 50%, which makes less than $30,000 a year.
No, it's more than half makes less than $30,000.
Now it's more than half. But the bottom 50% has only 1% of the nation's wealth. The bottom 50% of our country. And the other thing that blew me away was they had a lady from Alabama who sent a letter to the United Nations to have the United Nations comes to Alabama, some of the other places.
Oh yeah, I remember.
I remember when
I'm glad they brought that up.
And went, what the heck is this poverty level?
So the United Nations came to Alabama and other places in the United States where there's literal sewage backup in people's houses, and there's literal sewage farms that are throwing the feces in the air in poor neighborhoods. The United Nations said that this is unheard of in first world countries. This is worse than third world countries. That's what the United Nations said about cities in America. And the city in particular, I cannot remember the city in particular that they were talking about, but the city is 20 minutes away from Selma, Alabama. So when people go down there to go to for the anniversary of Selma, they usually stay in that city, and I can't think of the city's name. I'm gonna look it up because I had it in my notes. But the solutions of universal free college and tuition, Medicare for all, a living wage, those alone are not enough. They are a good start, but they are not enough. Because even when you look at wealth disparity between races, a black man in America that has a college degree that is in America's terms successful has the same wealth as a white man who dropped out of college or dropped out of work.
That's right. Yep.
When it comes to the economic power, when it comes to the economic line of America and the way that we look at wealth in America, and and also how you take a look at the systems that have been put in place in order to keep some groups away from wealth, or the policies that have been enacted in order to destroy certain groups' wealth. And, specifically, the first one I'm talking about, the policy of redlining families. Absolutely.
And the second, and this is my favorite thing I learned this year so far, is Japanese internment happened because white farmers were mad that the Japanese were kicking their ass at farming.
Really?
Yes.
I did not. I didn't know there was an explicit economic factor.
Oh no, there's a couple different things.
There was a complete and total economic factor because the Japan, like, I'll find the thread because it's enlightening. Jump my tracks. What had happened after Asian immigrants came over and helped build our railroads, BT Dubs. They needed something to do, and specifically Japanese immigrants did something really, really well because they come from a culture that is from a mountainous island. So when you're focusing on agriculture, you have to kind of make the most out of the smallest space as possible. So, because of their cultural farming techniques, they were inherently outproducing white farmers and driving up land prices for white farmers because white farmers were getting beaten in competition. And then the whole internment thing that happened, that was just like a handy, Pearl Harbor happened, the Japanese attacked us.
Oh, yeah. And you see that come, and I'll just be real brief and then toss it over to Lawrence, but you see that happen a lot in American history. Our xenophobia and economics are inexplicably tied a lot. Like, look at the prohibition of marijuana had a lot to do with that. Mexican immigrants were very much demonized for bringing in this quote-unquote demon weed, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of that propaganda was paid for by the alcohol and tobacco industry that saw Mexican marijuana as competition. But let's get a little bit more to the town hall. Lawrence, go ahead.
Okay, another couple things that struck me is they brought up a poll from wait, I had it. One third of factory workers make $11.09 an hour. $11.09 an hour. So majority of factory workers who are, because majority of unions have been busted. These factory workers are working 40 hours a week, yet they're still being subsidized by American taxpayers. About $5.1 billion are still being used to subsidize their living standards. when those companies in particular are some of the richest companies in the world who are making record profits, yet they are still paying their workers a non-livable wage. And also another statistic that also blew me away was that 44% of people who are homeless, 44% of the homeless population in America work 40 hours a week. Mm-hmm. They work 40 hours a week, but they don't make enough. Right. But they don't make enough to live in an apartment, a home, or something. They are homeless.
And I want to. There's this great book about, and I forget it.
Poverty.
I forget the name of it. But there was a whole episode of Chris Hedges on Contact where they interviewed this woman who's an author of this book about how a lot of these Amazon warehouse employees live, and they talk about how they basically live in their vehicles, they live in their RVs. A lot of them are senior citizens. I'll hop to you in just a sec, Luke. I did want to bring up one of the things I did glean, and I don't know how much to talk about this in the town hall, but there's an article in The Nation where they interviewed Bernie about this town hall, and one of the things he brought up, and we talk a lot, we critique the media a lot in this show, and one of the things he mentioned, which is a very important distinction he made between what we usually talk about here on the program is there's a difference between fake news and bought news. So in the sense that like CNN is not quote unquote fake, but it's bought.
Corporate.
It's corporate.
It's paid for.
Yeah. It's paid for.
They get paid hush money to not pay attention to specific things.
They
get paid money to produce specific content.
Let's keep it real. When Bernie Sanders' first town hall on the healthcare system, right? Mm-hmm. On the healthcare system, it had over 1 million views within a couple hours. Do you really think that CNN would put that on and then have a commercial by Stryker or Pfizer or Bear's aspirin come on? Right after? No, they're not going to do that. The reason why they have GE and Barrett's aspirin and Pfizer and Monsanto's and those are commercials is because they don't have to talk about Medicare for all or healthcare or free college or Medicare for all without having the neutrality bias of having a Republican or someone else who works for or is a lobbyist for those said companies saying the complete opposite, saying that you don't need this. Meanwhile, and this was the thing that was brought up during the town hall on Monday, the number one thing, the reason why most people go bankrupt in America is because of medical bankruptcy. It's not because they're working so much that they get sick or they spend too much money at the mall. No, they're going to the hospital too much and they can't pay their bills. Mm-hmm. So when you have wealth inequality, when you have a standard of living in a country where the top 10% owns over 75 to 80% of the wealth in the country, and you have the bottom 50% of the country that has only 1% of the wealth in the country, then we are no longer living in a place that's called democracy or a thing that's called capitalism, because that is not sustainable, and that is not how we are going to survive.
All right, Luke, did you have something you wanted to throw in there?
No. Not anymore. I mean,
go watch the town hall. It is on YouTube. Mm-hmm. You can look it up. Just type in Bernie Sanders. You could look up Bernie Sanders.
You're going to make me interrupt my One Piece watch.
hey, go look. It's only an hour and 45 minutes. Yeah. Go look it up. I think the Young Turks still have it. The Guardian still has it on their page. I think Now This still has it on their page. It's only an hour and some change. Go look it up. It is amazing. It's worth watching.
I'd say you could play it in the background during your next D&D game, but that might make it take some interesting turns. No. All of a sudden the DM's like, so the oligarchy's taking over your kingdom, and
it turns out that the Lords of Waterdeep are actually bought by powerful merchant guilds
and the liches of the
and a nasty lich named Soros. behind it all.
All right.
Oh, God.
If you haven't got, we're nerds in many capacities,
Oh, my
ladies
God.
and gentlemen. All right. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we've got the first in our series of each week between now and the end of Western semester, we're going to be interviewing one of the candidates who are running for to take on Fred Upton in the fall. And today we have on Eponine Garrod. But first, let's go to a quick break. You are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Alvan Humane Society is a non-for-profit, no-kill animal shelter that has been serving Allegan, Van Buren, and surrounding areas for almost 50 years. They are hosting their CARES Fund Drive and are over halfway to their $500,000 goal. Alvan can currently house around 30 dogs and 100 cats. Money raised from the CARES campaign will go to build a new shelter which will expand this capacity by 20%. Alvan Humane Society has 20 dogs and 40 cats that are microchipped, spayed and neutered, and fully vaccinated, ready for adoption right now. To adopt a pet, donate to the CARES Fund Drive, or find out more, feel free to visit them on the web at www.al-van.org.
Are you trying to get your local Kalamazoo business name out to the WMU and Greater Kalamazoo communities? Why not do so while supporting Radio Evolution through underwriting and donations? For more information, please visit widrfm.org.
Don't go backwards.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. We are joined here today by Eponine Garrod, who is one of the 6 candidates running for Congress here in the 6th District.
Wow!
Wow. Yeah.
Wow! Applause line. Wow!
So I'm gonna defer mostly to my co-hosts to go ahead and ask those deep those dank questions. But first of all, I don't know, like, what's the quick and dirty, if you could introduce yourselves to the listeners out there?
Sure. So my name is Eponine Garrod. You can call me Epi. Eponine's what you'll see on the ballot. I am a scientist. I got my degree in chemistry from Michigan Technological University, so I'm ready to put scientific fact back in environmental policy, which I know is a crazy notion in this day and age. I'm running to unseat Fred Upton for a multitude of reasons, but the strongest of which are that I'm sick of a government that continues to put profit over people and who continues to cater to the elitists and not the working class. In addition, we need more youth in our government, we need more women in our government, and we need more scientists in our government. So to be able to provide that 3-in-1 deal, I thought it was an indication that it was time to throw my hat in the ring and see what happens. I live in Kalamazoo, but I travel so much around the district, people forget that often and think I live in another county. So I'm glad to be on the road, knocking doors, and I am an activist first and a politician second, so I will always be out there on the front line, putting my body where my words are and making sure that I'm actually walking my talk. So that's just a little brief, quick and dirty intro of who I am, and I look forward to answering some questions.
All right, so I guess Luke, Lawrence, who wants to start out here?
All right, well, let's do something that most journalists don't do when they have a politician on stage. Let's talk about some policy, and let's just get it out of the way. So would you call yourself a progressive?
Yes, I definitely would.
Okay, so one of the things that we were just talking about was income inequality. Bernie Sanders just had his town hall, and there's been a huge movement for the fight for 15. If you were to unseat Fred Upton, do you have a policy, or would you fight for a living wage that's tied to inflation?
Yeah, 15 is not even enough when you look at the statistics and how much inflation has risen over the years, and minimum wage has followed, and not really followed behind, it's stagnated. One of my favorite reads that I just dig into every now and then to remind myself is Runaway Inequality by Les Leopold. One of my favorite books because it continues to reignite the passion to fight for the working class. So to expect people to work for a minimum wage that is not a living wage is completely asinine, and really it gives a clear picture of who our government is working for, and that is the elitists. It's not the working class. When we have folks who can't work just one job to get by, taking to feed their family, to feed themselves, to pay their rent or their mortgage, who are we really working for?
Right.
It's not for ourselves.
Right. Just to add to that, for those who are listening, 44% of workers in America, that like 44% of homeless in America work a 40-hour job, a 40-hour-a-week job, but they don't have enough money to own a home. The average income of the average American in America is $30,000 or less, and that affects majority of women and single mothers more than anybody else. Those simple statistics.
Yeah, and specifically across the 6th district, our median family income from the last census tax data is below $50,000 a year. Fred Upton's wealth isn't even completely known because he has so much hidden money, whether it's offshores or he's not reporting it. He doesn't release his taxes for us to be able to see all of that information, but we know that at minimum he's making at least $175K a year in Congress. I would also like to see some kind of regulation where the average income for the district is tied to the congressperson's salary so that they can't be making 2 or 3 times as much as the average working person in their district. I think that would be a quick way to see income start to rise in the area.
Man, if average congressmen, men and women, were paid the same, had the health care and was paid the same amount as the average person in their district, We would have not only a living wage, we would have free college and tuition. We wouldn't have to talk about Social Security
We'd
every.
be taking Lamborghinis.
Oh yeah, right.
To school.
Right, swerve. Okay. We didn't knock that. We didn't knock on that. Let's talk about education. We always talk about how education is a great equalizer, but many statistics show that even as a black man that has a college degree or some type of college education, that my wealth does not equal the same as a counterpart of mine who dropped out or did not even go. So, first question: how do you feel about free college and tuition? Second question: how would you? What type of policies or incentives would you put on those on that so people could go or want to go, or a type of incentives that you would have for the people in your districts that you want to represent?
Really good question. So I am absolutely in favor of free public universities across the country, but especially, hey, we're in Michigan, let's focus here first and be a model for the nation, so we can pass something at a federal level. And the next question people usually ask is, how are we going to pay for it? And there's a lot of answers to that if you want to get into that.
I mean that too.
Yeah, so, well, number one, we can cut our defense spending significantly. That's an easy chopping block.
Are you kidding me? Like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but like, didn't they just spend like another $80 billion on the military?
They did. They actually, so Congress increased the military budget twice in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
With bipartisan support.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Democrats aren't an anti-war party, so it keeps on getting demonstrated over and over and over again that they are not really an anti-war party. Would you fight against, or actually, excuse me, rephrase, would you fight for ending the wars currently and to bring our military intervention into accordance with the Constitution as is, because currently our interventionism is not in accordance with the law of our own land?
Yeah, so I'm definitely a pacifist first and foremost. I believe the first answer to conflict is diplomacy, and then the second answer is diplomacy, and third and fourth, until I understand that there can be last resorts. Definitely am in favor of ending any overseas ground wars, air wars. We have drones in places that we should not have drones. There's a lot of conflict going on overseas that isn't even being publicized in our corporate media. Those are all places that we need to pull our troops out and bring them home. We need to get our drones out of the skies. We need to get our fingers out of the Israeli-Palestine conflict. We need to focus on what we're doing here at home before we go bombing other places and losing our own citizens to mindless wars. Now, I understand there has to be strategy about that. We can often cause more harm pulling out right away to the country and leaving them resourceless. But it's possible, and anybody that says otherwise is just plain not creative enough and doesn't care enough. So yeah, I am completely in favor of pulling out of those areas. And you're right, the things that we're doing right now, they do violate our Constitution. We are not thinking about the people, we're thinking about how we can profit off of the back of wartime efforts. I hope that answers your question.
You said that you would cut the military spending to pay for
specifically defense budget.
Yeah, it makes when people say, how are you going to pay for it, in Bernie Sanders' policy on a conservative estimate costs $70 billion. And we gave around 300 billion or
it's $700 billion total, and it was an $80 billion increase from what Trump requested.
And they were already getting like 300 billion, right, or something.
You're talking about the defense budget?
Yeah.
No, they were already getting like 620 billion. So, yeah.
So for a fraction So for a fraction, oh my God, it's logic, folks. For the fraction of what they're making, we could have universal free college and tuition, and that would be something that you would support, that you would advocate for.
Absolutely, and if nobody else is putting that legislation on the floor, I've got a good writing hand. I'll get to work. And a lot of people will conflate cutting defense spending with eliminating defense spending, and I just want to get that red herring out of the way. Obviously, we need a defense budget, but it is extravagant. Extravagant is an understatement for how much we're putting into our defense budget right now. And when we look at how our veterans are so poorly treated, and honestly, they make up a huge percent of the homeless population, which we mentioned earlier, where is that money going?
The average, for those who do not know, the average the average military personnel, the average person that enters the armed forces makes around $18,000 to $20,000 a year. Think about that. The average American that serves our country with their lives doesn't make as much as a teacher
or their congressperson,
right? And we wonder, where does that money go? The Pentagon just did an audit and they lost $7 trillion. $7 trillion of our taxpayer money. Where did that go? It didn't go to the soldiers. like you know what I'm saying? Okay, I'm sorry. Because this is supposed to be about you. I'm sorry.
It's not, though. It's about all of us, and that's equally important. I would also be in favor of, or introduce legislation for, if necessary, tax on Wall Street. I'm definitely in favor of what is commonly called the Robin Hood tax, which is a small percentage on Wall Street transactions where there currently is no taxation, whereas if you or I were to go to a store and do an exchange or sell to each other, we would have to pay taxes on that transaction. In Wall Street, the computers do it, and they do it really fast, so they don't have to pay a tax. The European Union has shown us a model, an effective model to make this work. And even just that Robin Hood tax alone, some economic models show that could pay for all of public education with money left over.
Kind of a tack-on question to that, since you're in favor of a small percentage Robin Hood tax on transactions of money being exchanged to create more money. Note: value is worthless when money's made up. Money's not real. Would you also, looking future forward, as automation continues to do jobs that people used to do but now don't need to do anymore, would you, looking forward, be open to the possibility of putting a tax on automated factories, automated production?
Yeah, automation is definitely a multifaceted issue, but a tax is definitely something I would be in favor of if that looked to be the most promising path forward to prevent jobs being taken by essentially robots. My primary strategy to that solution is to really invigorate and strengthen unions in our areas and have worker protections for people. But if we need to include some kind of incentive for companies to not replace people with robots, we have to hit them where that hurts, and that's in the wallet. So I think a tax would definitely be an effective maneuver.
I just want you to know that what you're saying right now goes against what Debbie Stabenow and Gary Peters and others just did to deregulate Dodd-Frank. So you would not support what your colleagues in the Congress in the House just did. Some of your Michigan, Senate, right. Some of your Michigan representatives, like Tim Kaine and others. You don't support what they just did.
I do not, and I've heard a lot of back and forth on what they've been doing, and quite frankly, what I've heard is a lot of excuses. I think that vote was very reminiscent of something that may have worked 10 or 20 years ago. When Stabenow first started, she'd been in this business for a while now, but they're career politicians, right? And they make a lot of good choices for us, but not 100% of the time, not 90% of the time, really probably not even 80% of the time. So I would absolutely hold them accountable, as I'm holding them accountable now. I contact Debbie Stabenow's office fairly frequently, Gary Peters as well. I've been in touch with their representatives that they send out to the area. They know me by name.
Wait. The representatives come to the area, but they don't.
I've seen both of them, and actually, no, the only time I've seen Gary Peters in person was at the MDP convention. I have seen Senator Stabenow in person a few times. But I have no problem going up to any of my colleagues to tell them that what they're doing is antithetical to what their platform is saying they're doing. I'm happy to be the one to be the bearer of bad news. I'm okay with that responsibility. I'm probably not going to make a lot of friends in Congress, I'm going to be honest, but I'm not there to represent the fellow Congress people. I'm there to represent the district, and the district is unhappy right now. Our state is unhappy right now, and that's the message that we have to take to the folks who are making these decisions at the moment.
Yeah, Gary Peters and Debbie Stabenow takes multiple millions from the financial industry. Are you... Because speaking on that, how are you financing your campaign? Are you taking money from corporate America? Is that something that you're doing, or like what's going on with you?
Absolutely not. I've actually signed with a group called Candidates with a Contract to say that we're not taking any corporate money, no dark money. Right now, our grassroots, and it will continue to be, our campaign is funded by grassroots donations. We are actually the most underfunded campaign in this race right now, and we're still out there taking names. You know, we're getting just as much recognition, if not more, than some of the other candidates, and that's been proven statistically, not just from word of mouth. And that's because we know how to stretch a dollar, and we are taking honest money. We're not going to pay for things we don't need with money from people who are getting that off the backs of the people. Okay,
well, going back to one of the things that you said earlier, that you're for peace, and you're for you're a pacifist, and you're for peace, and you're for diplomacy. You know, if you watch, if you watch CNN and MSNBC, you know, diplomacy may not necessarily be the rhetoric that some of these pundits and some of your other colleagues might have, especially when it comes to the Robert Mueller investigation or the Trump, our president's ties to other countries. But more specifically, the thing that I wanted to talk about was him wanting to sit down and have conversations with North Korea. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
So tolerance is a bit of a paradox.
Okay.
You can't tolerate intolerance because that's how you let intolerance and hatred win. So we have to be willing to draw a line somewhere. And that is not to say engaging in violence or anything like that. Obviously, if you're backed into a corner, you might have to do what you have to do. And that's kind of speaking to the anti-Richard Spencer rally that actually Hoodrat and I were just at not too long ago.
Wait. What just happened?
Oh, well, I'll let Epi talk
wait,
about that.
what just happened? I missed that nugget of information.
Yeah, we were both in East Lansing at MSU to protest Richard Spencer while he was there.
Oh, man.
And we did not engage in violent activities. However, there was violence all around us, and that's one of the situations. You know, we were literally up against Nazis. Modern Nazis.
Wait, there was Nazis at the Richard Spencer rally?
Absolutely, wearing swastikas, doing the salute, doing age-old Nazi chants.
I did not see this. I was not.
Richard Spencer.
I know Richard Spencer is. I know Richard.
Richard Spencer, the modern face. Richard Spencer, the modern face of the neo-Nazi party, and you're surprised that there were neo-Nazis there?
I'm not surprised. It's just the fact that, one, I have not paid attention to this nugget of information because I was too busy rewatching the Inequality Town Hall.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Richard Spencer doesn't want to do it anymore because anti-fascists took the fun out of it. No. So, screw you, Richard Spencer. Have a nice life. Go back to mediocrity.
Right. Here's the thing, and it goes back to kind of like this. I have a stance that's kind of like what Kyle Kalinske from Secular Talk says, and he's like, well, no, let them come and speak. And then you get someone like Dr. Cornel West to come the next day talk about the exact same subject. You know what I'm saying? Let Milo Yiannopoulos and any other disgusting human being who thinks that they're superior to other human beings, let them go and talk, and then have, you know, Nina Turner or Dr.
I'm not sure.
I forgot his name. I forgot his name. No. I cannot think of his name. I can't think of his name. Never mind.
I think so. Basic general idea though is like have somebody kind of, you know, speak from the other point of view.
No, that's the thing. Like if we're gonna have a discussion about how you feel that Anglo-Saxon heritage is the best kind of heritage, then I can also bring up the fact that that same type of heritage is also responsible for the Holocaust. So I mean, like, you know.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that to an extent, up until the point where the other side is literally preaching genocide. That kind of hateful rhetoric, allowing it to assemble, to normalize, and to grow is dangerous. And it, you know, I truly believe there's a difference between free speech and hate speech. And if you're going to gather folks to talk about how in an ideal world you would be killing anybody who doesn't look like you, well, I may be a pacifist, but I'm going to be right on that front line with my bullhorn telling you to get out, to leave. This is not the country for you to be hateful. Ultimately, I'd like to have a globe where we're not hateful, but I'm also not naive.
Right. Okay. So since I missed that, I'm upset that I was not at that at that rally. I'm so upset that I missed it. Next time, y'all.
No, we scared him.
I told you about that, Lauren.
I would know. You did not. You did not. You told me that you were back in town because after the vacation.
No, that was weeks ago, man.
No, son. I was not.
It was weeks ago.
Hey, I was not informed.
It was like 2-3 weeks ago.
I was not informed about this.
Well, that's because you don't read chat.
Hey, see what happened was, I ain't gonna talk about that right now. What we're gonna talk about what we're gonna talk about is get back to more of this policy real quick before I gotta go. Okay, so you are for you said that you're for diplomacy and you're a pacifist, and that's true. That's cool. So something that I would like to ask you about is one of the things I want to ask you about is about the how do you feel about, we talked about automation, right? Mm-hmm. But another thing that's happening with our economy, if jobs are not being sent overseas and jobs are not being automated, they're being imported into private prisons, and they're being imported into prisons where the majority of the labor is slave labor wages, and majority of those people are black and brown people. How would you address that in Michigan when the third biggest economy in Michigan is private prisons?
Mm-hmm. So in an ideal world, and legislation I'd be happy to introduce, although I don't unfortunately see it going far, would be to make privatization of prisons illegal. In my opinion, I think you can argue that it's unconstitutional. It's modernized slavery.
It's unconstitutional.
Mass incarceration is modernized slavery in general, but that often begins with private prisons because the more inmates you have, the more they're profiting. They make a buck for every person. And you're absolutely right. Whether we do have slave labor here at home in the States with our mass incarceration systems, with our private prisons, where there's really no accountability and very, very little regulation. The food that we're serving to inmates is not real food. It's essentially garbage with maggots inside. That's including in our home state of Michigan. And a lot of the prices that we get at large commercial stores like Walmart, the reason those prices are able to be so low is while we are imposing these tariffs on imports coming into us from outsourced labor, they can be shipped to a secondary country where it can be rebranded and then sent without that tariff. And a lot of those products are being made with slave labor. One really good example is the garlic industry. Over in China, they use folks who are imprisoned, rightfully or wrongfully. They're imprisoned and they're locked in rooms for hours with buckets of garlic to peel it, so that we, back at home, can go to the Walmart for $3 and buy a jar of pre-peeled garlic.
I mean, Walmart, Victoria's Secret, Boeing, GE, a lot of companies that still attached to Alex still use slave labor in America, and we still use those products, but a lot of people don't know about it. I would like to see some regulation, and I would like to see you put up some regulation on dealing with that issue, especially other issues of inequality like criminal justice reform. I would love to hear that. But we do need to hit two topics since we're talking about Kalamazoo. One thing that I just read from Luke is that Bobby Hopewell is not going to be seeking re-election.
That's right.
And I would like to hear your thoughts about that, since we're talking about representatives of the 6, and he is the mayor of Kalamazoo. I would like to hear your thoughts about that.
I think it's actually a really smart move on his behalf. He's come into the public eye more and more lately, and he's loved, dearly loved by so many, and at the same time, there's a whole underbelly of Kalamazoo who sees that the city has done nothing for them, and he's the figurehead of the city, and so there needs to be responsibility and accountability on his part for that. And I know there's things that happen that are outside of his control. That happens for any leader, but I don't, at least in my opinion personally, I don't think he's truly risen to the amount of responsibility and accountability that I would want out of a leader. I don't think he's done a bad job, but I don't think he's done a great job. I was really proud of the way that he and 4 of his fellow city commissioners voted to remove the statue, the fountain in Bronson Park. I thought that was very admirable, but there have been many faux pas, even going back to the Foundation for Excellence. There's been folks that I've spoken to all across the city who have had real issues where they feel like they haven't been listened to. And again, as the figurehead for the city, you can't just show up to celebratory meetings. You gotta be out there with the people that you're representing day in and day out. And I just did not see a lot of that from him.
Could I actually interject? And I know I'm not going to ask a lot of questions, but there's 2 questions I'm going to be asking of all the candidates who live in the Kalamazoo area, and this leads right into it. And as a candidate and a Kalamazoo resident, I'd like you to maybe expand on, 1, how you feel about the Foundation for Excellence, and maybe extrapolate a little bit more generally on how you feel about similar attempts to deal with city, estates, and even our nation's budgetary problems through privatizations models like the one we're seeing with the Foundation.
Yeah, so I was actually the only candidate for this district who showed up regularly to the city commission meetings on the Foundation for Excellence, and I was not there to support it. There's photos of myself on Facebook with several other folks who were there. We had duct tape over our mouths to indicate how we felt like we were being silenced by the corporate elitists who did essentially buy the rights to what happens in our city. And we were told, we were assured, oh, no, don't worry. Their money's not going to be louder than your voice. And how so many of them said that with a straight face, I will never understand. But we already see this starting to happen. In city commission meetings, we saw it with the fountain, which is another reason why I'm so proud of our commissioners who voted to remove it. People threatening to pull their funding, using their money to try to overpower the voice of citizens, and opening up the doors to privatization like we've done in Kalamazoo, but as we see happening across the globe, as you mentioned. It's just another way that capitalism is winning, and we have to continue to stand up against it. I think the FFE is going to provide lots of good things for Kalamazoo, but at what expense? I think these good things we could have achieved a different way if we had simply budgeted more carefully, created a better and more transparent plan for the future, and reprioritized where the money in our city is going. Downtown is beautiful enough right now while we focus on replacing the water pipes in our neighborhoods, while we focus on getting the homeless folks places to stay that aren't Bronson Park in the middle of January in Michigan. It's all priority. I love downtown. I think it absolutely has room for improvement, but it's good enough while we take care of the people. The foundation was not the only way to do that. There was an income tax that could have been a possibility had the billionaires not swooped in to save the city. It's starting to resemble Gotham more and more. I keep using that analogy.
Oh my God!
It was essentially essentially emergency management wrapped in a gift bow. And they say don't look a gift horse in the mouth, but horses are taller than me, so I'm gonna look right in their mouth.
When I think of that excellence, and I'm reminded that there are multiple pipelines in Kalamazoo that are lead-based pipelines that still need to get pulled up, still need to get fixed. A lot of them are in poor, disenfranchised parts of our city. I would like to ask you more about that, because that's something that you can't unfix. You can't unfix people who have lead in their system. And in Kalamazoo, especially in the 6, we have a high level of tainted water. And I would like to get your thoughts on it, and if you were representing this district, what you would do to try to fix it.
So there's a lot of labor that goes into replacing the pipes. I would say that is going to be our biggest obstacle, not the money. We can fund it. Again, it's just a matter of priorities. And part of the reason I say the labor is going to be our biggest obstacle is because we've driven vocational training out of this state, out of this district. We've taken trade work and basically said, you don't matter, we won't pay you what you're worth, get out of our state. And now we find ourselves in a deep rut where we don't have enough people who are skilled in the trades. So that's going to be our biggest obstacle, but that's not to say we can't overcome it. So you're right, we can't at this moment get the lead out of people that have lead in them already, but that's not to say that it's impossible. We just simply haven't taken the time and the money to research it, to put the resources into determining what can we do? What are our options? Maybe we can't eliminate the lead in people's bodies. Maybe with the right treatment, our bodies will do it naturally over time. And potentially there's things we can do to alleviate the effects that come from a heavy metal poisoning. We just don't know because, like you mentioned, a lot of these issues affect those who are socioeconomically disadvantaged or who don't have the privilege that a lot of folks do. So they don't get paid attention to. They don't get folks representing them because they're not the ones who can funnel money into their pockets.
Just real quick, we're not going to cut to break because this is a great conversation, but just out of obligation, I do want to say that you are listening to WIDR 89.1 FM, okay. Kalamazoo.
Don't drink the water.
Right, one last thing, because before I have to dip out, you've mentioned it multiple times in this interview, but money in politics. Now, last time I checked, 97% of Americans believe that money corrupts politics, and there's a group that multiple people are a part of, called Wolfpack, and there are other groups that are trying to get a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics. Would you support it, or are you a part of it? And if you are not a part of it, would you be a part of it and supporting it if you become the representative of the 6?
Yeah, I'm not currently part of it, but I do support it. There's absolutely no reason to have this much money in politics. It's absurd. Our campaign, I think the last time I added it all up, we've raised under $2,000 or right around $2,000. A lot of that came from my own pocket spread out over time, because I'm not a millionaire. I'm not even 100,000-aire. I'm more like a $200.
We all here balling on a budget. That's how this works.
Yeah, exactly. I think I was listening to Janelle Monáe saying she makes her dollars do yoga. I was like, I feel that.
Right.
But the fact that we're out there, you got to put in a little bit more elbow grease. And if our representatives, or the folks trying to be our representatives, aren't willing to put in that elbow grease, if they just want to buy their way to the seat and not have to do the work that comes with it, then they're not really going to be representing us. It comes down to, would you rather go out and do the work? Yeah, you're going to be tired every single night. I am. It's not fun every single day. Absolutely not. But that is the price you have to pay to get to know the people in your district that you're claiming to represent, not just to throw signs in their yard because you can afford to buy hundreds of thousands of dollars of yard signs. You can buy ads in the paper. You can buy spots in a parade. That's not what being a representative is about.
Okay. I'm gonna let y'all handle the rest of this interview. Right, I gotta dip out. We're gonna have another me and you are gonna have another conversation after the whole show and stuff. But I absolutely support your platform, and I've read your platform. I definitely would support you or one of your other progressive or some. There's one other person that I'm really down to support, but we have to talk more about some other issues as well. But I have to go. I love y'all. Peace.
Thanks for being here.
Okay, so Mr. Luke, you got any questions for the candidate here that we haven't not gone through yet? Oh yeah. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Hey, now I can speak on the radio again.
Yeah, we don't have to. We can. Yeah,
I don't have to. I kind of want to talk about the clown car that is the Democratic race for the 6th. In the case you don't make it, which candidate would you prefer to be the one to take the race to Upton?
Yes, so obviously I am my first choice, but my second choice out of the candidates that we have would be Matt Longjohn.
And why is that?
He and I agree on, I would say, 90% of the issues. I feel like he does generally have the people's best interests at heart. Most of our disagreements, I think, are more about economic issues than social issues, which I'm more willing to compromise on. And I believe that he truly is in this race for unseating Upton and being a betterment for this district, not to have any kind of career or promote his own ego.
Could I just build off of that real quick? Because this is a question I'm also going to ask Paul Clements and David Bannock when they come on the show.
Oh, I plan on asking it to everybody.
This is basically, so there are 3 candidates in particular who are running, who loudly proclaim, that they are the progressive candidate. David has the endorsement of Brand New Congress, Justice Democrats. Paul Clements talks a lot about how he was the Bernie-crat running in 2016. So with those 3 candidates all proclaiming to kind of be the torchbearer of the progressive movement, what makes you the best progressive choice in this race?
So looking at it from a progressive angle, we talk about wanting to fight for the working class. We talk about wanting to fight for women. We talk about wanting to fight for our youth. We talk about wanting to be activists and making sure that we're following through on our promises and our commitments. And out of all of us that are saying that we are progressives, I do truly believe that I am the one that walks my talk the most, 100% of the time. Being young, being female, being a scientist, those are all identity politics, but they are important in this political climate when those are things being attacked by the current administration. And then I see the other candidates at some of the less controversial rallies and events fighting for social justice out in the district and in the surrounding area. But what I don't see is them really doing a lot of organizing, doing a lot of the legwork. I'm there to help set up and tear down for all these organizations around the area. I show up to the meetings not to campaign, but to be a part of it actively and to listen, to learn, to contribute. I have folks who don't want to be part of the campaign who have told me to my face that there's other candidates they want to support. And I'm still there at their organization to help them because that's how much I am about the movement and not about myself. The other candidates, I do believe they're good people, and I wouldn't say that they're establishment, but in terms of being the most progressive as we define it today, I believe that I really am the one that shows up where it matters in order to claim that status or however you want to describe it.
Great. Luke, do you have more questions?
I don't have a follow-up to that one. So I am going to shift to just kind of a generalized question. If you make it to the Hill, and we've got the laundry list of progressive issues on the table. If you had to pick exactly one, you can branch into two if you need to, but one to make it a personal pet project to make sure that it's a success, which one would it be?
If I could only pick just one,
yeah,
which is a hypothetical because I take on a lot.
Exactly.
But if I could only pick one, hands were tied, I would go to the floor today and fight tooth and nail for the Off Fossil Fuels Act, introduced by Tulsi Gabbard, because the number one threat to our entire planet is rapid human-induced climate change. And you have to say it that way because otherwise people tell you, oh, the climate change is naturally.
Climate change is natural.
Yeah.
So in terms of that, would you tie that into like a position for Michigan and try to put Michigan as a forefront of green energy? Would you try to fight for that as well?
Absolutely. We have a myriad of natural resources here in Michigan. Our Great Lakes are 20% of the world's surface fresh water, and we have oil pipelines running through them. This Off Fossil Fuels Act would, in effect, help us to shut down Line 5. It would help our Great Lakes Watershed Act. It would help so many facets of our state in protecting the environment and creating clean energy jobs simply by forcing us to move away from fossil fuels.
Yeah, I'm tapped.
All right. Well, you know what? I think that's probably. Whoa, sorry.
Was that an oil pun?
That was an oil pun. Okay. But I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up too, and especially as we get the other candidates on, want to make sure they have similar time. So. Eponine, I want to thank you again for coming on the show, and just any kind of parting thoughts you would like listeners to hear.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, and I'm really glad you guys are opening this up to all of us to be able to get out to the folks listening, and thank you for tuning in. You can follow the campaign on Facebook at Garrod for the House. We also have a website, garrodforthehouse.com, with the number 4, not the letters, because I'm really bad at web design. So, and once you get on those two things, you'll be able to connect to the rest of our social media, email, phone number, etc. If you want to volunteer for the campaign, we are solid grassroots. So absolutely, there's a spot for you on the team, whatever talent you can bring to the table. And if you have any questions that weren't answered on this show, or you've been to a forum and didn't get a chance to ask, or you're just tuning in now and listening and you had one come up, please reach out to me. I'm accessible, unlike Fred Upton, and you can ask your questions, and I will be happy to provide you with an answer.
All right. Thank you so much, Eponine, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
I'd say, well, actually, we have a few minutes before our next guest, who are going to be calling in by phone, to discuss the issue around this happened while I was gone. But for those of you who are not aware, there is somebody being put up at a local church because ICE basically has them in their crosshairs. Luke, have you heard about this?
Oh, I have heard about this. Actually, while we still have you here, what's your position on ICE? What would you like? That's kind of up there, actually. Like,
my position on ICE, the FCC will not allow me to say on the radio. ICE is terrible. No human being is illegal. The fact that our entire state is under the jurisdiction of ICE is outrageous. And actually, I was part of a group of folks, which you were part of too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When ICE was here in Kalamazoo, we got in a car and put on the police scanner and tried to pinpoint them, going from call to call, trying to figure out where they were. I don't know what we were going to do, the four of us in a car together against ICE, but by gosh, we were not just going to stand by and be complicit.
Yeah, and, something important to bring up to, before I call up Pastor Dannison is... I think there's some misunderstandings, even kind of supported by some Democrats. I remember Kamala Harris recently talked about, it's like, oh, well, it's important to keep ICE for our security, and you just have to make sure they're not, like, being as, ruthless as they are now under Trump. But, let's be clear, ICE is a very young agency. It's only been around since, 2000... I think it was mid Bush administration. So it's ICE is younger than I am, I think probably younger than Eponine here, who's 24. So this agency does not have the kind of permanence or history of, say, the FBI or CIA, and they got some problems too, but. Yeah, this idea that we somehow need this agency around for our security when, it was a bad idea to start with, and it's only getting worse.
Yeah, but anyway, this ICE decided to roll through Kalamazoo again. At this time, coming after a local member of the community, a certain woman.
Sahid,
yeah.
I don't have the
story pulled up.
Yeah, but
I believe she's still there under sanctuary.
Yeah, I think in the particulars we can work through with Nathan once we get him on the line.
It's a bunch of garbage.
It really is.
I mean, really, what we have here is an example of a federal agency operating similarly to a Gestapo.
Oh yeah, it's very similar to brown shirts.
Yeah, we've got an organization that has this nasty propensity to rip a mother away from her screaming children.
Oh, gosh.
Grabbing fathers while they're trying to pick their kids up from school. Overall, it's just pretty... doesn't look good when before they'd kept relatively under the radar by only going after people with criminal records, criminal records, and not you ran into the police after a party while you were underage drinking.
Oh yeah,
17 years ago.
And
whatever.
as much as you can criticize Obama for being overzealous, and immigration activists themselves call him the deporter in chief. There were certain standards. The raids would happen at night, and Trump has turned up the cruelty dial in a very big way. It's like the red meat to a lot of conservatives.
It's open season on quote unquote undocumented and illegal people, which really means it turns out that the process for legally emigrating to the United States takes a really, really, really long time.
Oh yeah,
and most people who are undocumented because their visas expire while they're busy trying to be in the immigration, while they're trying to actively immigrate to America.
Yeah,
So-
and I think nobody really, very few people have an appreciation or understanding for just how difficult acquiring citizenship is. I
should really talk to my dad about it, because he had to go through the German immigration system to get his permanent green card.
Yeah.
And their system is even stricter than ours. They're super, like, the German immigration system is run like the tightest ship.
Yeah.
And they don't allow a lot, and the application process takes over 2 years for a permanent residency, not even a citizenship, a permanent residency.
Yeah. So, yeah, this idea that it's just that easy to, why don't you just become a citizen? Well, the roadblocks to it are numerous. As a matter of fact, if you're immigrating from Mexico, unless you have a business who is willing to vouch for you, unless you already have a family member here, you can't even legally start coming to America, let alone acquire citizenship. However, and this is important to bring out, there are certain allowances that will get you through the process much more quickly. For example, if you are an entrepreneur or you have a certain amount of net wealth, I believe it's $2 million.
Yeah. If you've got money, we want you.
Yeah. And that's not even like me being like, oh, the rich can get in. Like, that's literally our immigration policy. If you are rich, you can get in, and we will let you become a citizen, because apparently you're more valuable if you have a lot of money. All right. I think with that, let's go ahead and take a break. And once we come back, we're going to have Reverend Nathan Dannison join us to discuss the recent sanctuary situation at his church. You're listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
WIDR would like to remind you to please drive safely. Drunk driving not only puts your life in danger, but the lives of others as well. If you find yourself stranded somewhere, consider calling Drive Safe Kalamazoo, phoning a friend, or having an Uber pick you up. Thank you for listening.
Wider Battle of the Bands would like to thank Kelvin & Co. for supporting Radio Evolution. Located at 232 East Michigan Avenue, Kelvin & Co. is an all-natural barbecue joint. To find more information about their food options, you can call 269-350-5236 or visit kelvinandcompany.com.
I like digging holes and hiding things inside them. When I grow old, I hope.
For those interested in
underground hip-hop,
here is a complete disc jockey show with all the modern pace of today's exciting radio.
Listen here on
Saturday night
from 7 to 10.
You can't go wrong.
There's one important element missing, however. That's you.
hip-hop epic show. Saturday night. I mean, DJs bring me young, play that real live show. The hip-hop epic show.
I know you're gonna dig it.
Yo, I'm talking about the hip-hop epic show. The DJs bring me young. Transmitting live. Saturday night. WIDR Kalamazoo.
Bouncy.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. We are now joined by Kalamazoo's favorite activist preacher man, Mr. Nathan Dannison. How are you today, Nathan?
I'm doing great, Andy. How are you?
Pretty well. So, as we mentioned at the top of the show, I wasn't here last week, but it seems like everything happened at once while I was out of town. And we've got a really, I guess I would say, intense or big situation at the church. Just laying out some context. So you are currently providing sanctuary to a Kalamazoo citizen at your church. That's right. And for those of my listeners who maybe haven't heard about this, could you kind of lay out real quick, just like, who is this? How did your church find out about it? And what led you to the decision to provide this woman with sanctuary?
Yeah, so her name is Sahida. She's an elderly woman from Kalamazoo. She's a caregiver at a house for disabled adults. And also she is one of the providers for the refugee house here in town. For mysterious reasons, ICE decided that it was time for her to go, even though they had supported her remaining here in the past to complete her work. We learned about this from her lawyer, and we said, if she requests it, we're going to keep her here. We're going to protect her, keep her safe, do whatever we can to keep her with her family.
Well, that is fantastic, Nathan, and I'm glad that people are stepping up, to help out with this. So, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to him for a moment about, I'd say your church is not the only church that has stepped up to do this, and I was wondering maybe you could speak a little bit about this larger movement among, religious institutions, churches across America, who have really stepped up in light of the Trump administration and their more aggressive Gestapo-like tactics that they've pumped ICE up to use, and just kind of how they've stepped up to help out people in need who are being targeted by the administration.
So the most important thing to remember is I think that ICE is 15 years old. ICE has existed for 15 years. The church has existed for 2,000 years. We have a very long history of protecting poor people who've been attacked by the state. And the state will always attempt to scapegoat or to abuse or oppress people for their own benefit. And the church, at least the Church of Jesus Christ, was established to be on the side of the people who are being targeted by the state. So what we're doing is par for the course for Christians. And I think for most of the Christian churches that are providing sanctuary, this is just normal operating procedures for us. We would have done this today. This is the sort of stuff we did in the 1930s. This is stuff we did in the 1670s, the 1400s, all the way back to the days of Jesus.
Oh yeah, and definitely agree. I'd say, ladies and gentlemen, there's definitely a lot about that in the history books if you look it up. So out of curiosity, and there's every situation is different, and every church does it differently. But I was a little curious about just kind of from whether it's like a strategic perspective or whatever other considerations went into it. But what went into the decision to kind of make this public, to have like a press conference about it and contact the local media? Granted, like I'm just kind of curious because there's definitely positives and maybe potentially negatives to doing that, but what made the church decide to inform the community about it?
Sure. Well, first of all, Sahida Nadeem she's a really big part of our city. So she is sort of locally known for taking care of kids. And it was important to us that we told the community of Kalamazoo, hey, look, the federal government is coming to town, and big government is coming here to Kalamazoo to steal someone away. They want to take her. And, most people don't think about the federal government in their normal life. They just sort of deal with local government. But it was important that we said to them, hey, look, Lansing is coming, Washington, D.C. is coming, and we need to protect our people. You need to understand that we're not safe because because ICE is coming. This new agency that was organized under the Department of Homeland Security. The second reason is because ICE in the past, when churchmen and clergy have kept it a secret, ICE has successfully accused them of harboring fugitives, and they've been able to manipulate local law enforcement into arresting them on federal harboring charges. And we wanted to make sure the pastors of our church were kept safe so they could do their work. We're not ashamed that Sahida is here, and frankly, we believe that if every single American knew that Sahida was here, that this problem would go away. So she's got nothing to hide. She's a hardworking American citizen. She's a hardworking part of this community, and just because she lacks a certain stamp on a certain document or whatever, we consider her a resident. We consider her a citizen. We consider her a part of this community, and somebody wants to steal her off and ship her off to a country she hasn't lived in since she was a teenager just so they can fill a quota. It's not going to happen.
Oh, that's great to hear, Nathan. I definitely say us on the show, we pretty much have the same stance. I really don't care if Sahida is an American citizen. She's a citizen of Kalamazoo. That's enough for me.
That's right.
So after you went public with it, what's generally been the response? Have you been getting a lot of support from the community with maybe kind of a similar stance to ours? Has there been pushback? What have you seen?
I know your show is. I know most of the folks who listen to your show are not reactionary types or more progressive types, and we've received a ton of support from that community. But I got to say as well, Fred Upton, who has definitely not been 100% on the right side of history with everything, he sent her flowers the first night she was at the church, and he pledged his support to her. So we're seeing bipartisan support for her, and let's just go ahead and say tripartisan support too, because you and I both know that there are a lot of voters out there, myself included, who do not feel like either of the political parties in power support them. So what we're seeing is support from Democrats, Republicans, and also Americans who are thinking for themselves, and that's been really positive. Honestly, the only negatives that we've heard have been from random internet comments from anonymous cowards, and a lot of those are of course financed by outside reactionary forces that are trying to destabilize our communities.
No, that's very true, and as me and Luke often say, don't feed the trolls. So
that's right.
I was curious. People have been asking, is there anything they can do to help Sahida or help the church while y'all are providing sanctuary?
If you are a person who's creative, if you can create a fundraiser or something to create some more, we're not going to depend on money to fix this problem, because we are spiritual beings, we're spiritual creatures. We believe there's a higher power at work. But if you're a creative person and you can write music, or you can make poetry, or you can create something artistic and beautiful that you can use to publicize her cause. She's an auntie, she's a grandmother, she's a sweetheart, she's an elder in our community. Also, in the coming days and weeks, we're going to have concerts, and we're going to have fundraisers, and also letter writing campaigns. We'll have opportunities for people to tell their elected officials that they support Sahida. If you're interested in providing support to her directly, just send us an email at the church. Literally, you can just Google First Congressional Kalamazoo, but our website is www.allwelcome.church. Just get a hold of us. I'll tell you what's up.
Oh, that's really great, Nathan. If I could ask, and this is a bit of a broader question, but in a lot of ways, we've particularly seen in the last couple of decades how a lot of right-wing and very well-funded conservative politics have gotten themselves into the evangelical movement, and there's a lot of Americans have a sense that conservative and like anti-immigration politics are tied into American Christianity. I would say there's definitely a flip side to that. The activist Christians in like kind of the William Barber MLK mold, but where do you see kind of the modern state of American Christianity, where you have a lot of it is tied into right-wing reactionary politics, but you also have, and what I'd say is really like on the upswing, this kind of progressive, human justice-oriented Christianity?
Yeah, I mean, I would call them Jesus Christians. I think that they are human oriented, but they're really oriented toward Jesus. I think the best lesson that you could get would come from just reading the Gospels. There were very popular, powerful, wealthy, reactionary religious people in the time of Jesus, and they were called the Pharisees. And we have evidence for that in the Bible. And Jesus, of course, was never wealthy, and he was never very popular. And in the end, it appeared that he lost, but he won. So it's important for people to remember that in any age and in any time, the people who appeal to the authorities of the world, the politicians, powers, and principalities, those are not the Jesus people. The Jesus people are out there in the world, working hard, sweating, digging ditches, trying to save their brothers and sisters, and they don't frequently get to be on TV, and they don't get to be in the newspapers, but they're out there. They're always out there, and frankly, they win. And so just don't worry, don't worry too much. We're gonna win. We always win. We're gonna win this time too.
So I'll ask kind of a follow-up to that. So you did mention most of my listeners are more kind of progressive or radical or leftists, but I think there's a lot, and you've talked pretty eloquently about reaching out to like those in our friend circles, families who don't necessarily share the same ideologies that we do. How would you what advice would you give to listeners who maybe have to have that conversation where the person on the other side is like, oh, this Sahita woman is a fugitive, or I don't like her religion, or maybe that she deserves to get arrested by ICE? How would you recommend people approach that conversation and try to maybe like help broaden folks' minds on that?
I would just remind people that that outrage and anger doesn't work. It feels good to get angry, and it feels good to be outraged at people who are wrong. And believe me, I do it every single day. But outrage and anger has never changed a single person's mind. In the case of Sahita, she's a hard worker. She's paid her taxes. She'll never receive any benefits for that. She's never received any of the social benefits in the U.S. But frankly, that's neither here nor there. You shouldn't have to be a hard worker to be a part of this country. You shouldn't have to be a taxpayer to be an American. The reality is that if we can just view one another as human beings and just understand that we are actual beings. I keep slipping into theology. We're all made in the image of God. Each and every one of us is a child of God. It's so hard to hate. And I would just tell your listeners, don't be outraged. Don't get angry. Just, if you can do anything at all, just caution them. Just caution them and say, hey, hang on. Just don't be hateful. Don't be hateful. If we can tell people, don't be hateful, maybe the next step is compassion. And compassion is going to fix this mess.
Beautiful words, Nathan, and I think that rings very true. I guess I do want to ask, how has the rest of the religious community in Kalamazoo responded to this?
Some of them have been, as the Bible says, faithful with their lips. So quite a few folks have said that they want to help, but they're not willing to take any political risks. I want to say that our Unitarian Universalist brothers and sisters, both at People's Church and at UU Community Church, have been very, very supportive. We've received words of support from the Jewish community and the Muslim community, and the Imam has been very supportive. We've got ladies from the mosque who are coming to bring flowers to the people of our church on Easter Sunday. That's an important holiday for us, and we want us to know that they support us. To the other Christian churches, unfortunately, a lot of them are afraid or ashamed to alienate the members of their church that worship the God of the American flag instead of the God of the Bible. I understand that. I understand what it's like to be afraid for your job. But I would just remind them that, we serve something greater than the flag. We serve a God who is alive and who expects things from us.
That's right. Now, Luke, I wanted to make sure. Do you have any questions or things you want to bring up while we have Nathan on the line? No? All right. Well, I don't know if there's too much else I can really dig into except to say, on behalf of myself and the local community, we really are grateful and appreciate what you and the church are doing to help Sahida out in this difficult time, and for really taking on that risk and being outspoken and putting your face where your mouth is, so to speak.
We have the privilege to do that. Christian privilege is a real thing in this country, and we're going to use it to do as much as we can to keep her here.
Well, that's wonderful, Nathan. And just one last time before we let you go, if people want to help, what are the best ways to do it?
You can visit the church's website, www.allwelcome.church, or just stop by 345 West Michigan. Let us know what's up. Otherwise, you can email me. It's just my last name, Dannison, DANNISON, @gmail.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Nathan. God bless you. And I will make sure to keep telling people about what's going on and try to help you out as much as we can. So you have yourself.
Thank you, Andy.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. Have a great day. We're going to let you go. We'll go ahead and do that. All right. Again, a big thanks to Nathan Dannison for coming on the program to talk about the situation going on at the church. We've got about 7 or 8 minutes left, and I did want to touch real briefly on this Cambridge Analytica thing that just came up.
That's the big one. Yeah. That's the real big one that I have not dived as much into as I really need to.
Well, I'll tell you. I'll start with one. I want to give a big. I want to give mainstream media a cookie because they're actually talking about one of the things that genuinely affected the election. So
good job. Yeah. You're supposed to be doing this all the time.
It's like, wow, you guys are actually doing your job. Great. Yeah.
I mean, I heard it from the BBC. Yeah. So
yeah.
I mean.
Well, it has been on CNN, and I'll tell you, bouncing around to different Greyhound stations. I saw it on Fox News and CNN and MSNBC. And for those of you who need a little background, so there was a whistleblower who talked about it, and we're talking about nearly 50 million Facebook profiles that Cambridge Analytica had access to. Data that they'd mine from, they do things like, polls and your likes, and they would use those to basically create this data that was very valuable to the Trump campaign via Steve Bannon. And this company is owned in part by Robert Mercer, who we've also talked about, was extremely influential in getting Trump elected, basically saved the campaign when it was in crisis mode through an influx of cash. Robert Mercer was basically the Koch brothers of the Trump campaign.
Robert Mercer has more money than the Koch brothers.
Yes, he does. And Cambridge Analytica was this thing that him and Steve Bannon had kind of in their back pocket to really, one, invade people's privacy and use that data to try to curb the election towards Trump. I'll read just some snippets from the NPR article. They were fully aware of this. They knew exactly what they were doing. And keep in mind, this is a UK-based company, so this was a foreign corporation influencing our election, which is against election law. And a big controversy, Alexander Nix actually was recently let go, probably with a corporate parachute, because he's been at the center of this scandal. But it's through some undercover reporting that Channel 4 did. They gloated about it. I'll read a little bit from it. Nix, who was the CEO at the time, tells a reporter posing as a the reporter was posing as a political consultant seeking help with campaigns in Sri Lanka that he'd met with Donald Trump many times, while another senior executive says the Defeat Crooked Hillary advertising campaign was the brainchild of the firm. We did all the research, all the data, all the analytics, all the targeting. We ran all the digital campaign, the television campaign, and our data informed all the strategy, Nix told the undercover reporter. We just put information into the bloodstream of the internet and then watch it grow. Give it a little push every now and again over time to watch it take shape, he says. And so this stuff infiltrates the online community, but with no branding. So it's unattributable, untrackable. So a couple things to bring up. The big scandal that came out with Russia recently with the memes. We've talked about how it was really ineffectual. Most of it didn't reach people. The memes themselves were really ridiculous. And a lot of them didn't even happen until after the election. So this, on the other hand, we're talking about data from 50 million people. We're talking about extensive targeted advertising, stuff that is proven to actually work. And again, done by a foreign corporation at the behest of a very rich, very hyper-conservative American oligarch, Robert Mercer, and his white supremacist buddy, Steve Bannon.
Yeah. I checked out the Channel 4 expose, like at least the first part where they show the footage of these meetings. Mm-hmm. And these guys are, Cambridge Analytica is not just in the business of micro-targeting advertisement to people in order to swing elections. They're also in the information gathering game, in the skin game of information gathering, or at least it's not said outright, but the way it is said by Nix, who was recently ousted himself. He said it. Mm-hmm. He's phrased it in a way that Cambridge Analytica may or may not have honeypotted certain representatives or people in power in order to get what they need. Mm-hmm. So really, we're talking about a group that is worth investigating on the merit of the undercover journalism alone.
And it's worth mentioning, too, that the same corporation had basically the same sort of influence and bragged about it with the Brexit vote.
Yeah, so they bragged about Brexit a whole lot.
Oh, yeah. And granted, it doesn't run into it does run into its own problems with election law. They're talking about that in the UK Parliament right now. But, just one last thing I want to really hone in on is there was an American journalist / comedian who has been talking about Cambridge Analytica for months. And granted, this recent whistleblowing really shows the extent of the influence they had and the kind of data they collected. But there, for months, there was somebody drawing the connection between Robert Mercer and his use of Cambridge Analytica to swing the election. And it's somebody that mainstream media and a lot of your nice white liberal friends call a Russian Putin puppet. I'm talking, of course, about Mr. Lee Camp. Who, again, he's been talking about Cambridge Analytica for a very long time, but nobody paid any attention to him because...
Well, now I'm going to have to go watch all of Lee Camp's videos on that whole topic because... Whoa.
Yeah. Google, or I guess DuckDuckGo it, because Google's not showing a lot of stuff from him these days.
I mean, I follow RT on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
I'm already past the filtration system where they keep... RT videos out of my suggested videos feed.
Don't you like that thing on YouTube too, where it's like this video is funded in whole or in part by the Russian government, and it's like I wish they had like that below a CNN clip. It's like this network is funded in whole or in part by, and just a dense list of corporations.
I really wish Enron was still around just so we could use Enron as the punchline.
Oh yeah, really. But pay attention to non-mainstream sources. A lot of times they're ahead of the curve and they catch these stories way before mainstream media ever talks about it, if they ever do. So, all right, it's about 7 o'clock, so we should probably go ahead and wrap this up. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. Keep it tuned in. We're here every week from Wednesday, 5 to 7. And keep on fighting for that revolution solution.